"Can you take her instead of me?" asked the little girl. The rancher said nothing, then took both. Texas, 1870, border livestock market. The sun beat down like a sentence passed from heaven itself. Dust clung to the lips, to the lashes, to the soul. Men haggled over horses, cattle, barrels of grain. But farther back, where the crowd thinned and morality grew scarce, were the pens, not for animals, for people, women, mostly, some young, some not, most with bruises older than their hope, most no longer called by name. Ryland didn't look left when he passed them, didn't let his eyes catch on the bindings, the ragged dresses, the silence. He had come for horse medicine. That's all, but something tugged his coat. He looked down, and there she was, barefoot, brown-eyed, 4 years old at most, clinging to his coat like it was the edge of a dream. "You don't have to take me," she whispered, eyes too wide for such a small face. "Just take my mama." Bo turned. In the shadowed pen, slumped against a splintered post, was the woman. Her body hung like breath undone, one eye swollen shut, wrists bound, lips split. Dust caked her collarbone. She wasn't unconscious. She was past it. The little girl spoke again. "Her name's Lena. She didn't eat. I gave her my bread. All of it." Bo crouched slowly. His knees cracked like dry twigs under his coat. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Rosita," she said, voice thin. There it was, a name. The thing no one had asked for until now. Bo stood, jaw locked. He walked to the slaver's table, threw down a pouch of gold. It hit the wood like a judge's gavel. "I'll take both," he said. The man raised an eyebrow. "That one." He jerked his thumb toward Lena. "She ain't likely to last the ride." Bo didn't blink. "She'll make it." And the girl? Bo looked down. Rosita stood with her little fists clenched. "She comes too." The man smirked. "You just bought yourself a whole mess of trouble. Cowboy." Bo's voice stayed low. "I've had worse." He cut Lena down gently, like lifting something sacred from a battlefield. He carried her with both arms, not over the shoulder like a sack, not dragged. Her body was limp, but Rosita walked beside him with her small hand curled in his. No one clapped. No one jeered. The crowd said nothing. But when they passed beyond the shadow of the pen, a breeze stirred the dust, and Rosita whispered into his coat, "Thank you for taking both." Bo didn't answer, but his grip tightened, and something old inside him, something buried with his wife and daughter, stirred like a match kissed by wind. Have you ever seen kindness bloom in a place so dry it didn't seem possible? We'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your town or state in the comments below and stay with us, because this isn't the end. It's just the first step. The ride back was quiet. Rosita sat nestled against Bo's side on the saddle, small hands clutching his shirt like they were afraid the world might steal him away. 2. Behind them, Lena lay limp across the saddle blanket, tied down gently, breath shallow but present. Bo's land lay tucked behind 2 hills, wrapped in cottonwoods and silence. The kind of place where the mail never came and the world forgot to knock. He hadn't brought anyone there in 5 years, not since the morning the fever took Clara, not since the day he stood in the doorway of the little blue room and realized he'd never hear his daughter laugh again. That room had stayed closed ever since, until now. Bo carried Lena inside the house without ceremony, but every step he took into the blue room felt like trespass. The walls were still sky-colored, soft, faded. A wooden lamp sat crooked on the windowsill. Beneath the bed, a pair of scuffed shoes, size too small. On the nightstand, a photograph Clara, gap-toothed, arms around a real lamb, smiling like sunshine hadn't left yet. He laid Lena on the bed, carefully, as if worried the house might protest. She didn't stir. Fever still clung to her like heat trapped in cloth. Her skin was pale, lips cracked. Rosita hovered by the doorway, uncertain. "She's burning," she whispered. Bo nodded. "Then we'll bring the fire down." He moved with purpose, boiling water, grinding willow bark, mixing it with molasses. Rosita followed his steps like a shadow, helping crush herbs with her little fists, soaking cloths in cool water. Together, they worked, Bo cleaned the wounds on Lena's wrists, wrapped them tight with clean bandages. Her ribs were bruised dark, her lips split from sun and silence. When he touched her skin, she flinched, even unconscious. Still, Rosita climbed onto the bed and began wiping her mother's brow, whispering, "I'm here, Mama. I'm here now." And Bo stepped back. He leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, rifle nearby but untouched. He watched the room fill again, not with sound, not yet, but with something close to breath, close to memory. A light flickered back into that room, not Clara's light. No, but something new. A woman not dead yet, a daughter not letting go. That night, Bo slept in the chair by the door, boots still on, rifle across his lap. The fire whispered low, and Rosita curled into the quilt at the foot of the bed like she'd always belonged there. The next 2 days passed like waiting out a storm. Lena didn't wake, Bo didn't leave, and Rosita refused to cry. On the third morning, just after sunup, Bo leaned in to change a bandage and felt it. A flinch, then a groan, then her eyes dark. Alert, afraid, fluttered open. Bo froze. "You're safe," he said softly. But her first word wasn't his name. It was Rosita. Before he could answer, a small blur launched across the room. Mama, arms around neck, tears in 2 directions. And Bo stepped back, quiet, unseen. Just a man with dirt on his boots, watching a miracle happen beneath blue walls that had only ever known goodbye. But healing doesn't always come soft. Sometimes it shows up wild-eyed, swinging. By the end of that first week, Lena could sit up without gasping. Her color had returned. Not fully, but enough to remind Bo that strength didn't always roar. Sometimes it showed up in silence, in the way her hands stopped trembling when holding the tin cup, or how she let Rosita braid her hair again. But Bo knew the worst wounds weren't the ones that bled. They were the ones that stayed hidden, deep, coiled. It was the third morning after she woke when it happened. Bo had stepped into the blue room. A soft knock, first, always a knock, then asked, "You want me to bring the brush?" Lena said nothing, just nodded. He handed it to her gently. The wooden handle was smooth from years of use, Clara's initials still faint on the side. Lena took it with stiff fingers and stared at it like it might bite. Bo turned to leave, to give her privacy, but before he reached the door, her voice caught him. "Could you?" she whispered. He stopped, looked back. She had turned her back to him, sitting at the edge of the bed, the brush resting in her lap. "If you're careful," she added, not looking. Bo crossed the room slowly. His boots thudded soft on the wood. He didn't speak, just lifted the brush and began at the bottom slow strokes, untangling knots, avoiding the bruised parts near her scalp. Lena said nothing at first. Her back remained rigid, her breath shallow. Then suddenly, she flinched. Hard. She turned, eyes wild. And before Bo could step back, the brush came down. She struck him once, twice on the shoulder, not with force, but fear. Her chest heaved, hand shaking. "You bought me," she snapped. "You think brushing my hair makes it better?" Bo didn't raise his voice, didn't raise his hands. He just stepped back, hands open. "No," he said. "It doesn't." She stared at him, breath ragged, eyes shining with unshed fury. But beneath it, shame. "I don't belong to anyone," she whispered. "You never did," Bo replied. And then he turned and left the room, closing the door gently behind him. Lena collapsed onto the bed, fingers still gripping the brush like a blade. But she didn't cry. In the hallway, Rosita stood small and still, watching everything. "He sleeps on the floor," she said softly. Lena blinked. "What?" "He brushes your hair," Rosita whispered. "But he sleeps by the door. Every night. I see him." Lena turned her head. For the first time, she noticed the folded blanket and pillow tucked into the corner, easy to miss, but never moved. He hadn't touched her, hadn't tried. He had waited, and in that stillness, something shifted. That evening, Bo brought her dinner again, set it down, said nothing. This time, she nodded, and when their fingers brushed, she didn't pull away. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is stay gentle. If this moment stirred something in you, Hit like or leave a quiet comment, just a single word. Healing. And if you know someone who needs to hear this kind of story, feel free to share it. Bo hadn't spoken much of the war. Not to Lena, not to anyone, really, but the war spoke through him in the way he tensed at sudden knocks, the way his hand hovered near the rifle, even while pouring coffee, or the way he woke some nights with a gasp, eyes open, staring into a room that was no longer burning. Lena noticed it. She didn't press. But one evening, after Rosita had fallen asleep, curled up near the hearth, Lena wandered into the main room, blanket around her shoulders, and found Bo staring into an old metal box. His brow was furrowed, hands trembling slightly, not with fear, but with memory. She paused in the doorway. "What's that?" Bo glanced up, startled. Then, without a word, he turned the box toward her. Inside were letters, dozens of them, some opened, some still sealed, all addressed the same way. "To Clara Ryland, from your papa." Lena sat beside him slowly. "You wrote her?" He nodded. "After she passed, I kept writing. I didn't know what else to do. Couldn't talk to God, so I talked to her." Lena's fingers brushed over the envelopes. The ink had faded in places, smudged by weather, by time, maybe even tears. "I never mailed them," he added. "Just folded them up and kept them close." Lena picked one up. It was dated 3 years ago. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Can I read it?" Bo hesitated, then nodded. She unfolded it gently. The handwriting was rough, like a man unused to writing, but the words were tender. He told Clara about a late frost that killed the corn, about a colt that didn't survive its first storm, and then about a little girl he saw once at the trading post, who reminded him of her. Same wild curls, same stubborn smile. Lena stopped, blinked hard. "Rosita." He'd seen her before. "That was her," she said softly. "You saw her before the auction." Bo didn't answer right away. "Then I couldn't save her that day," or the woman holding her hand. "But when I saw her again, clutching my coat, I thought, maybe this time I'd get it right." Lena's throat tightened. Her voice caught. "You're not trying to replace Clara." Bo looked at her then, eyes red-rimmed. "I know. You're just trying to be the kind of man she'd still be proud of." He nodded once. That night, Lena slipped a small folded page into the box. No address, no name, just a single line in her careful script. "Thank you for saving her, and thank you for letting her save you back. But not all ghosts stay quiet, and some men don't forgive being robbed of power, of property, or of pride." The days after the letter passed slowly, like the earth itself had paused to let something fragile take root. Bo didn't say much. Neither did Lena, but they moved around each other with a new awareness, like two people tiptoeing through broken glass, afraid to make the other bleed. And yet, the silence between them wasn't cold anymore. It had weight. It had warmth. One morning, just before sunrise, Lena stepped onto the porch. The air was crisp, touched with the edge of coming fall. Bo was already there, sharpening a blade at the edge of the steps. Not for war, not for defense, just for whittling fence stakes. He looked up, nodded. "Couldn't sleep." She didn't answer. Instead, she walked toward him slowly, bare feet brushing against the wood. She had something in her hands, small, wrapped in cloth. "I found this," she said, setting it beside him, "in the loft." He opened the fabric. Inside was a bracelet, just twine and beads, faded from sun and time. A child's trinket. "Clara made it," she asked. He nodded. A slow breath leaving him like a sigh pressed down for years. "She tied it on my wrist the day before she got sick. Wouldn't let me take it off. Said it made me look fancier than the sheriff." A chuckle escaped him. Small. "True." Lena smiled, then hesitated. Her sleeve slipped down slightly, revealing the scar on her wrist, still red, still raised. A permanent reminder of the rope they'd tied too tight. She quickly tugged it back, but Bo had seen, and he didn't look away. Instead, he reached for the bracelet, and without a word, gently wrapped it around her wrist, not to cover the scar, but to rest beside it, like it belonged. Lena froze. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came. Bo looked up. His voice was low. "You don't owe me anything." "Lena, I know that. She stared at the bracelet. Then at him. I know, she whispered. But she didn't take it off. She wore it the rest of the day. That night, as Rosita drew pictures by the fire, Lena sat beside Bo on the porch. The sun dipped behind the hills, staining the sky in orange and violet. They didn't touch. They didn't speak. But when Lena's hand found his on the railing and rested there, Bo didn't move. He didn't startle. He just let it stay, and somehow, that simple touch, skin to scar, scar to strength, said everything neither of them had found words for yet. If this moment stirred something in you, let us know. Press 1 if you felt it in your chest, or 0 if the story didn't speak to you this time. Your voice matters more than you think. But not everyone believed a woman like Lena could simply start over. Some scars weren't just personal, they were public. It came on a Tuesday, when the wind carried no warning, and the morning chores had barely begun. Bo had just finished mending the chicken coop when he saw them riding in. 3 riders, dust on their boots, metal glinting beneath their coats. The one in front had a rolled parchment in his hand, held high like it was a sword. Lena was at the porch with Rosita, brushing the girl's hair. The moment she saw the horses, she froze. Her hands dropped. Her breath caught. Bo stepped in front of them without a word. The lead rider dismounted first tall, smug, with a gold tooth and a grin that didn't belong in daylight. "Name's Doyle," he said, voice like gravel soaked in whiskey. "We're here on business." Bo said nothing, just stared. Doyle unrolled the parchment. "Signed contract. Says the woman Lena is property of Marcardo Trading and Supply, on account of an unpaid transport debt. Papers stamped and legal." He grinned, held it out like scripture. Bo didn't look at it. "She ain't property," Bo said, voice quiet but sure. The second rider chuckled, fingers twitching near his holster. "That ain't your call, cowboy." Lena stepped forward, but Bo lifted one hand to stop her. His voice stayed calm. "I paid gold for her. And for the child, fair, legal, witnessed." "Doesn't matter," Doyle said, face tightening. "There's men up north who want her back. She's not yours. She's inventory." Bo's jaw clenched. Then he moved. Not with panic, not with rage, with purpose. He stepped back toward the porch railing and flipped up the edge of a wooden post. From inside, he pulled a lever-action shotgun clean, oiled, ready. The riders flinched. Doyle's smirk vanished. "You're trespassing," Bo said. "You leave now, or you don't leave standing." A long, dangerous pause. The third man shifted in his saddle. "We'll be back," Doyle said, voice low and tight. "And next time, we won't be talking." Bo didn't reply. Didn't have to. The shotgun resting across his arms was answer enough. The riders turned, dust curling behind them like warning smoke. Only when they were gone did Bo lower the weapon. Lena stood still on the porch, arms around Rosita, who buried her face in her mother's dress. "They'll come back," she said softly. Bo nodded. "Let them. But when night falls and men return with vengeance in their blood, will fire alone be enough to protect what can't be bought?" The next morning brought no riders, no threats, only the soft shuffle of feet on the porch and the clink of tin cups as Bo poured water into the basin. Rosita sat on the fence, swinging her legs, her wild curls catching sunlight like they held their own fire. She was watching Bo fix a broken saddle strap, her small hands fidgeting with a sprig of wildflower tucked behind one ear. He looked up at her once. She smiled, but then her voice came low, like she was afraid the wind might carry it away. "Can I call you Papa?" Bo didn't answer at first. His hands stilled over the leather, his breath caught in a place he hadn't dared to let anyone near since Clara. It wasn't the word that stunned him. It was the weight behind it. The question wasn't just about what she'd call him. It was about who he'd be from now on. Rosita stared down at her boots, already bracing for silence. But Bo stood, walked toward her, crouched down until they were eye to eye. "You sure about that?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Mama says you don't owe us anything, but I know you keep us safe. And you fixed her wrist, and you gave me my own blanket." Bo swallowed. "I didn't know if it was right," he admitted. "Didn't want to take something I hadn't earned." "You didn't take it," she whispered. "I'm giving it." And then, just like that, She slid off the fence and wrapped her arms around his neck. Bo froze, not because he didn't want to hold her, but because he wanted to too much. Slowly, his arms came around her, and in that quiet morning sunlight, something that had been broken inside him for years, something splintered by death and guilt, and a field full of ghosts began to knit back together. Not healed, not forgotten, but held. From the porch, Lena watched them. Her hands clutched a basket of laundry, but her legs wouldn't move. She heard the word, Papa, saw the way Bo held her daughter, like she was spun from breath and bone and something worth protecting. And Lena didn't cry. Not this time. She just closed her eyes and whispered a thank you to a sky that hadn't answered in a long, long time. But family isn't just built with words, it's tested by the fire that comes after. Bo didn't like showing weakness. Not to men, and especially not to women who had already seen too much of it in others. But when he staggered through the cabin door at dusk, his shirt stuck to his side with blood, and the pain in his ribs burned hotter than the forge ever had. He knew this wasn't something he could shake off. Lena was waiting. She said nothing as he sat at the kitchen table. Jaw clenched, one hand pressed tight against his ribs. She lit the lantern with practiced calm and fetched a tin of water, a roll of clean linen, a cloth soaked in something sharp-smelling, and a small knife Bo didn't remember her ever picking up before. "I need to get the bullet out," she said, quietly. It didn't pass through. He nodded, eyes not quite meeting hers. "You done this before?" She didn't answer, just rolled up her sleeves and poured whiskey across the blade. Bo grunted. "Well, that's comforting." A shadow of a smile flickered at the edge of her mouth, but it vanished quickly. He leaned back, gripped the sides of the chair. "Do it!" She didn't hesitate. The knife touched skin. The whiskey burned. And when the tip bit down and slid through torn muscle, Bo's teeth sank into a leather strap he'd bitten a dozen times in war. But this wasn't war. This was something quieter, closer. And Lena's hands, though shaking, were steady enough to cut, clean, and patch what others would have left to rot. She worked without flinching. She didn't look away from the blood. Not once. Not even when Bo hissed and muttered something sharp beneath his breath. By the time she pressed the last layer of cloth against the wound, her palms were red, her breath shallow, and her sleeves soaked. "You good?" she asked, voice hoarse. Bo looked at her, really looked. She wasn't just a woman who had been hurt. She was someone who stayed when it was hard, someone who did what needed doing. Even when her hands shook and her voice threatened to crack. "You shouldn't have had to learn this," he said quietly. She met his eyes. "Neither should you." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Just the sound of wind brushing the shutters and the soft clink of the bottle as she corked it again. Bo reached out, not fast, not forceful, and took her wrist gently in his fingers. He looked down at the faded scar that still lingered just above her pulse, then back up at her. "Next time," he said, "if there's pain, let me carry some of it." Too, she blinked, and this time, she didn't pull away. But before dawn breaks and trust settles for good, another storm brews just beyond the ridge. The forge out back had stood cold for years. Bo hadn't touched it since the winter Clara died. It had rusted in silence, a monument to what he'd lost, and never thought he'd have reason to build for again. But that morning, before the sun rose fully over the cottonwoods, Bo was already there stacking coal, striking flint, coaxing embers into breath. Smoke curled into the sky. Sparks spat and hissed. The anvil waited, patient and steel-eyed. He worked alone. Inside the cabin, Lena slept with Rosita curled beside her, both wrapped in the same quilt Bo had once stitched alone during one long winter, just to have something to do with his hands. Now those same hands gripped iron tongs. The brass shell casing lay nestled in the fire-dented gold, heavy with memory. Bo had carried it in his coat pocket since the war, one of the last bullets he'd chambered, one he never fired, not at the surrender, not at the raiders who burned his barn, not even when he thought about using it on himself in the blackest night. But he hadn't, maybe because deep down, some part of him had been saving it for something else. The casing glowed red, then white-hot. Bo pulled it from the flames, laid it on the anvil, and lifted his hammer. Each strike was slow, deliberate. The sound rang sharp and final through the trees. He shaped it flat, then curved, forming a circle not perfect, but strong. He cooled it in water, steam hissing like breath against skin, then polished it on an old cloth until the brass gleamed soft gold in the rising sun. No diamonds, no engraving, just a ring made from what should have ended a life now reborn to begin one. When he returned to the house, Lena stood barefoot on the porch, her hair tangled from sleep, eyes wide with quiet knowing. She didn't ask what he'd made. She saw it in his hands, and her fingers drifted to her collarbone, where the scar still lived. Bo stepped closer. "I've got nothing fancy to offer," he said quietly. "No preacher, no piano, no promises of easy." She smiled, just barely. "Good, because I'm not made of easy either." Bo swallowed. His thumb rubbed the edge of the ring. "This was meant to kill," he said, lifting it slightly. "But I didn't let it. You didn't let what they did kill you either." Lena looked down at her hands. "Some days I almost did." "I know," he said, voice raw. "But you didn't." She looked up. His eyes weren't asking for anything. They were offering something instead. "Lena," he said, stepping close, "I've got scars that still ache, ghosts that don't rest. But I've also got a little girl who calls me Papa now, and a woman who faced death and didn't run." He held out the ring. "I want to build something with you, not perfect, not polished, just honest. Will you wear this? Not for show, not for pride, but because we walked through fire and came out still standing." Lena took a long breath. Then she reached out and closed his hand over the ring. "I don't need flowers," she whispered. "I need this." Bo slid the ring onto her finger, slightly crooked, but snug, warm from the forge and something more. Her eyes welled, but she didn't cry. Not this time. She kissed his hand, the one still scarred from the rifle stock, and as they stood on that porch, wind in their hair, dust curling at their boots, Rosita stepped out behind them, holding a drawing in her hand. It was crude, childlike, 3 stick figures under a crooked sun. One tall, one with a braid, one small, underneath, in big, careful letters, family. But the ring was just the beginning, because a town that once looked away was about to look again, and this time, they'd either stand beside her or face the man who finally had something to lose. The old wooden sign Bo carved by hand hung just above the porch beam, letters deep and uneven, painted in worn green. La Casa de Esperanza, the House of Hope. He hadn't asked Lena's permission. He just did it one day after Rosita had drawn yet another picture. This one of a cabin with a garden and 3 stick figures waving. Underneath it, she'd written in shaky but proud letters, "This is home now." So Bo had taken his tools, the same ones he once used to build fences and mend troughs, and carved something new, something that wouldn't rot or fade, because what they had built quietly, slowly, painfully deserved a name, and it deserved to stay. Mornings came gentler now. Lena no longer flinched at the creak of a floorboard or the slam of a door. She moved through the house like she belonged, because she did. She swept the porch, hummed songs Rosita didn't know but would learn, and stitched dresses by the window, while Bo chopped firewood in the yard. She didn't hide her scars anymore. The rope marks on her wrists, the sunburn across her collarbone, they showed beneath her sleeves, and she let them. Because no one in that house asked her to pretend. Not Bo, not Rosita, not even herself. Bo, too, had softened. He still rose before dawn, still rode the fence line with his rifle slung across his back. But when he returned home, his hands went straight to Rosita's wild curls, brushing them back with a gentleness that surprised even him. He'd carry her in from the barn, boots muddy, arms strong, and she'd wrap herself around his neck and call him Papa like it had always been true. Lena would watch them from the doorway, her heart too full for words. Sometimes she still woke with nightmares, but now there was someone beside her when she did. Bo didn't talk much, not about the war, not about Clara or the wife he buried. But once, when Lena asked him why he never moved on after they died, he said this, because I was waiting on something that made the pain worth remembering. She hadn't said anything back. She just kissed him, not out of passion, but out of recognition of what it means to carry pain and still reach for warmth anyway. By spring, the townsfolk began to change. Not quickly, not loudly, but they did. Miss Alberta from the seamstress shop brought over scraps of lace for Rosita's dresses. The preacher stopped by with a Bible written in both English and Spanish. Even the sheriff tipped his hat when he passed their wagon in town. And once, just once, he called Rosita Darlene and handed her a peppermint. They weren't trying to fix the past, but they weren't pretending it didn't happen either. Lena had spoken at church once, just a few words, voice trembling. She'd stood in front of the congregation, sleeves rolled up, scars visible, and said, "I'm not a sermon, I'm just a woman who came out the other side." And when she sat down, no one whispered. One evening, Rosita climbed into Beau's lap, held a worn drawing in her hand, and asked, "When I grow up, can I live here forever?" Beau smiled, slow and quiet. "If you want." "Mija, this house is yours too." Lena sat across the room, watching them, her hands still. Her eyes full. She didn't say it, but she didn't need to. They had all been lost once. They had all bled. But here beneath the weathered beams, beside the crooked signpost, under the Texas sky that had once burned them, but now bathed them in light, they chose to stay. Not because they had nowhere else to go, but because they had finally found something worth staying for. And maybe that's the only kind of home that matters. The one you build after the fire. The one where nobody asks what came before. The one where even broken things get to rest. If this story reached something quiet in you, if it made you remember that love isn't always flowers and music, sometimes it's scars and silence and someone who stays, then let us know. Comment 1 if you felt it. Comment 0 if you're still unsure, but stayed till the end. And if you'd like more stories like this of grit, grace, and love rising from dust, tap that subscribe button. We don't just tell tales at Wild West Stories channel. We keep hope alive, one broken heart at a time.